We are only about 4 days out from the full unveiling of the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, in addition to the Z Flip 6, maybe a smart ring, maybe a smart watch, probably some earbuds Pros, lots of good stuff probably coming in just a handful of short days. But in this video, I want to hone in, as usual, back onto the Z Fold 6, and I want to ask a question that might not be sort of an obvious question, but I think it's an important question. There are two foldables being released in the US market this year, the Z Fold 6 and the Pixel Fold 2. There is no sequel to the OnePlus Open, apparently, coming this year. But even still, the question I want to ask for the majority of Fold users, possible Fold buyers for the year of 2024, should you buy the Z Fold 6 or should you just go with the OnePlus Open? And look, I get it. From some perspectives, that will sound historically like a weird thing to say. You've got a foldable that is a year old. The new one is coming out from Samsung. It's Samsung. Of course, you should just go with the Samsung device. But the more you dig into this question, the better the case I think you can make for foregoing the Z Fold 6 and just buying a OnePlus Open. Now, I'm going to push back on that in a couple different important places, but I think it kind of bears digging into this a little bit. So I made this post on Threads a little while ago with this spec sheet, and I'm actually seeing something that I should have had on there. I should have had the peak brightness of the screens on there, but we'll talk about that. And we're just going to kind of go line by line through these. And let's start with those screens. So for the main foldable display, they are very, very similar, with the Open being slightly larger. Now, one thing that you are definitely going to experience with these devices is you're going to have a crease that is going to be significantly less visible on the OnePlus Open than you will on the Z Fold. It just is going to be what it is. This is going to be a much harder to see crease. And if that's important to you, it's something that you kind of have to factor in. For the cover display, they're going to be very, very similar, although you can make the argument that the OnePlus Open is a little bit wider and is therefore a more standard phone shape. Very similar to what the Pixel Fold 2 is going to be doing as well. And that, if that's something you prefer, you want a more traditional phone shape, again, that's going to be very important. Now, in terms of brightness, if I'm not mistaken, the OnePlus Open is supposed to be 2800 nits of peak brightness. Now, I want to say that is the spec that it has been given, but I have seen, I believe it was either Linus Tech Tips or Short Circuit. It was one of those Linus-y channels. They tried to verify that peak brightness, and they were never able to hit 2800 nits. There may be some very specific HDR content that perhaps you can hit that brightness in, but in my experience, you don't really see it. In my experience, it's not really even that much brighter than my Pixel Fold has been, which is only like 1450 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong about that, but it's something like that. So 2800 is a number. It's not something that anyone, as far as I'm aware, has been able to verify. The Z Fold 6 is supposed to be 2600. I would feel a bit more confident in the idea that Samsung is actually going to, you're going to be able to verify that it's going to hit that. In my opinion, and look, even if they both hit their numbers, the difference between 26 and 28 is negligible. You're not going to be able to see it really with your eye unless you are like really, really paying attention. It's very, very close. I imagine they're going to be very, very close. So in terms of the displays, which way would you go? Well, for me, because this has a wider cover display and the Z Fold 6 is supposed to be getting a bit wider, but it's not going to be quite a normal phone like this is, I'm going to lean towards the OnePlus Open getting the nod in that category. For the processors, no question, no need to dive into it. It's going to be the Gen 3 on the Z Fold 6. We're going to give the nod to the Z Fold 6. For RAM, this also is pretty straightforward. 12 gigs for the Samsung, 16 for the OnePlus Open. And as AI stuff, large language models, which are going to be running on hardware themselves, as that becomes more and more of a thing, you're going to need more and more RAM. I've talked about this in the past. I did a whole video talking about this and relating it to the Pixel devices. I put a link to that video in the description down below. But again, no need to go much deeper. The OnePlus Open definitely gets the nod there. For storage, it's a bit more nuanced. The base model for the OnePlus Open is 512, and that is an advantage. But Samsung is UFS 4.0. This is 3.1, so that is faster storage. Let's just call that a draw. You could probably say the Open is better for having more storage. Maybe you think the faster storage is better. I'm just going to say it's a draw. For the cameras, you could argue that Samsung might take better pictures because of their processing. I don't know that I would agree with you, but you could at least make that argument. When it comes to the hardware, though, you cannot make the argument that the OnePlus Open does not have superior hardware. It has a better zoom setup, it has a better primary, and it has a better ultra-wide. This is the better camera setup. It might not be as consistent as my Pixel, but when it hits, man oh man, does it absolutely crush. For the battery, the OnePlus Open has the bigger battery. For charging, it is significantly better. Probably going to stick with 25 watts. This is 67 watt wired charging, guys. Now, yes, the Z Fold does have wireless charging. This doesn't. That is a big deal, but the wired charging is ridiculous. I got to give the nod to the OnePlus Open. The Open is thinner, and the Open is apparently, potentially, rumors be true, $500 cheaper most of the time. And we need to be clear about this. This is a rumor $18.99. Maybe it's $17.99. And I put $13.99 as the price for the OnePlus Open because it's been $13.99 most of the time that it has existed. Right now on their website, it is $13.99. If we go on Amazon, I think it's a little bit more on Amazon right now. It's $16.89. It goes up and down sometimes, but nonetheless, it's been $13.99 most of the time. And look, I know that there's going to be carrier deals for the Z Fold, and that's a big thing for people. Trade-ins are going to be a thing. We can't really predict the future on that stuff. Just looking at the price, potentially $500 more for the Z Fold 6. So just from this outside perspective, looking at the hardware, it is difficult to come to any other conclusion than the OnePlus Open has an advantage in most of these categories. I actually forgot to mention the S Pen, so I'm just going to throw it in here. The Z Fold does have the S Pen, so that might be a big deal to you, bigger deal to some than others. For me, I never actually use this thing, so it's easy for me to forget about, which is what I did in this video. And this might not make a ton of sense straight away, but that's why I am so excited for the Galaxy Unpacked event. I am so excited, despite the fact that we've seen the Z Fold 6, we've seen it in every possible angle. We know what it's going to look like. I am really excited to see what Samsung announces, because the most important part of this has not really been touched on all that strongly, and that is the software experience. These devices are going to be made or broken on that software experience, and let's be honest, while the OnePlus Open may have advantages in many hardware categories, when it comes to software, Samsung still has an advantage. And that's not me dumping on OnePlus, okay? Open Canvas is really good. They've done some good things as of late, especially with the OnePlus Open. But Samsung is still Samsung, okay? How often does Samsung come up with a feature and then 2 or 3 years later, Google rolls that feature into Android? It's happened multiple times now. It's Samsung. They're very good at this stuff. And they have rolled out tons of competing AI features like generative edit to their devices already, and that stuff is going to continue, and that is how the Z Fold 6 can differentiate itself. It has to be able to step out and say, here's why it costs more money. It's because of all of these crazy features that we're adding to the device. If those things aren't there or they're not sufficiently in place, I don't know why anybody would buy that device if the Open is still there on the market, which of course it's going to be. There's one other thing that I do want to touch on, other than that I do expect the software experience to be better for the Samsung device. And I do expect, of course, if you're part of the Samsung ecosystem, you've got a Galaxy Watch, you've got some Galaxy Buds, which they may package these things together to some degree as well. And that might also bring that price down theoretically, right? What if you're paying $18.99, but you get a set of Galaxy Buds Pro, or you get a watch or something like that crazy packed in with it? They've done crazier things in the past. Perhaps something like that could be coming. So that ecosystem is really important. But another thing is just the software and general support. I'll just say support. We can say software support. How often are the updates coming? How long are you going to get the updates? Samsung definitely has an advantage there over OnePlus. But just support in general, while there are complaints about the way that Samsung seems to handle broken devices and things like that, I think it still is at least a little bit better than how OnePlus does it. And the fact of the matter is, it's just not as easy to deal with some of these Chinese companies sometimes compared to companies like Samsung. They seem to be a little bit easier to kind of get a hold of and to get things moving from. Now, again, I'm not saying this is like a world of difference. I know that many of you will be in the comments saying Samsung device, it broke, they gave me their runaround. Plenty of bad stories both ways, but I do still think Samsung does a little bit better than OnePlus does. I really do think that we're going to have this pretty interesting situation where the OnePlus Open, despite being the older phone, is still going to be, in most ways, the superior hardware device. Unless, of course, the IP48 dust and water resistance thing is very important to you, which I think is relatively minor. It's a good thing, but I don't think it's going to overcome the other things that we've just talked about. But then Samsung's going to have the advantage in sort of everything else, right? Like the software experience, the software support over time. And you're going to have to decide, like, okay, OnePlus Open's hardware is better, but Samsung's software might be better, but the price is higher, so the OnePlus Open has the advantage there. It's going to be really interesting, and it's just odd to me that we are in this position, and it really shouldn't be the case. Samsung should not be releasing a phone that is going to be like a year newer than OnePlus's phone, and yet it's going to be such a close competition for which phone is still better. That's a crazy position that Samsung has sort of put themselves in by, in my opinion, being a little bit, would you say, lazy, resting on their laurels a little bit more than they ought to be. But guys, I really want to know what you think about this in the comments down below. Am I crazy? Is the breakdown what I think it is? Where would you disagree with me? And which way are you leaning? Are you looking at that Fold 6 and thinking, I don't know, maybe I'm just going to go with that cheaper Open that looks really, really good and it's been on the market and maybe the kinks in the software have been kind of ironed out a little bit more? Let me know in those comments down below, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.